I'm glad the air is working in here. That's a good thing. Other things around here not working, like my microphone. But that's okay. So this story is another very familiar one, which I mentioned last week can be problematic sometimes. We tend to take sides in this story, right? Are you a Mary or a Martha? But that kind of misses the point of the story, because it's not a competition between the two sisters, but we love competition and to pit people against each other, right? But that's not what this is about. It's not about whether or not Mary is better than Martha, or vice versa. So I'll tell you what it is about. Well, Jesus is traveling around, and he goes to a new town and partakes of the hospitality of Martha and her sister Mary. Now, this is the very same hospitality that Jesus told his disciples to partake in just a few weeks back, if you remember that reading, where he told them to go out and knock on doors, and if they weren't accepted, shake the dust off their feet, right? And then while Jesus is teaching, Mary is sitting and listening, which is important because it shows that there were female disciples, so that's a good thing to make note of. But while this is happening, Martha is working her tail off, preparing dinner or cleaning up dinner, whatever she's doing, and she gets so frustrated she wants Jesus to intervene. And I know that I've been there before, right? Feeling like we're not getting the help we should be getting, or any time in school when the teacher said, now we're going to do a group project. Because who in the group would do the project? Usually me. In my mind, anyway. But in the Gospel of Luke, hospitality means the giving and receiving of it. And it is a very crucial part of Jesus' mission. So when Jesus seems to scold Martha and tell her that Mary has chosen the better part, it seems like he's denouncing hospitality in general, if you read it quickly. But I say it seems because he's certainly not doing that. When the text says that Martha is distracted, the Greek word is, and I apologize, periaspato, I think. I didn't study Greek. Now, this word can mean distracted, but it means more like being pulled or dragged in different directions, which I think is more descriptive. Martha's failing here isn't that she wants to extend hospitality. It is that she becomes so distracted by the task at hand that she forgets the number one key part of hospitality, which is paying attention to your guest, right? You don't invite someone over for dinner and then leave them sitting alone in the dining room. Elizabeth Johnson writes, quote, "There is no greater hospitality than listening to your guest. How much more so when that guest is Jesus?" Jesus' words to Martha may be seen more as an invitation rather than a rebuke. The one thing needed is for Martha to receive the gracious presence of Jesus, to listen to his words, to know that she is valued not for what she or how well she does it, but for who she is as a child of God, end quote. So we have to balance the manual acts of hospitality and the essence of hospitality. So here, Mary and Martha are not against one another. Rather, they're kind of like two parts of the same whole, or flip sides of a coin. Jesus seems to scold Martha and says, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing." And we tend to read the double use of her name in a condescending tone, like Jesus is talking to a small child. But you can never tell tone from text, right? But maybe he's using it as an endearing tone or a tone of love. Maybe like, "My dear Martha," or "Martha, my friend." Here, Jesus expresses to her that there is a time and place to work, but there's a time and place for peace, prayer, and learning, and just being present with God. And in this sense, in this particular time and place, Mary has chosen better. Because Jesus would never condemn someone for being hospitable. That's like a major part of his whole mission. Just as Jesus would never condemn someone for praying, because in Luke he prays all the time. But when all a person does is either keep busy with work or pray, maybe there's a problem. There has to be a balance between action and contemplation. Martha worries so much that she drags her guest into a family argument, which I think we all know is not appropriate when you have guests over. And later in Luke, Jesus says, "Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life?" Now, we hear this a lot, but it usually doesn't stop our worrying. Our society as a whole is a very Martha society. We're taught that we have to be working all the time, or we're not valuable, right? We have to be available for work all the time. We have our smartphones and our email in our pocket all the time. What about a Sabbath day? Whatever happened to that? A day of rest? It's pretty much gone now. Most adults have to work 6 or 7 days a week, with Sunday is the only day they have any time off. Before I came here, I actually had a flip phone because I was spending too much time on my smartphone looking at email and stuff, so I switched to a flip phone. But then when I got here, my wardens texted me too much. And texting on a flip phone is very hard, you know. So I ended up going back to the smartphone. But I kept the boundaries that I had placed before. I'm not always checking emails, always worrying about work. I have a good boundaries on that. Because if you're always checking your emails or always answering your work calls, then people are going to think that you're always available, right? And then they'll expect you to answer at all hours of the night and day. And what does that do to somebody? What does that do to our sense of peace, our sense of free time, our sense of prayer time, right? It kind of ruins it. But it also, in my case, it ruined my working time and my hospitality time, because then it was just a chore instead of a joy. That's what's happening to Martha. Hosting strangers in your house in the ancient world was a duty. It was in the law, but it was also God's work and was supposed to be a joy. And Martha was not experiencing that joy. If we get burnt out on all our details and mechanics, we could totally miss where God is in the equation, and then it becomes a slog. If there's no joy in the work of God, why bother doing it? Now, there's time for work and there's time for prayer. And Jesus would never, and never actually did, tell us to choose between the two. So we're not in a competition today. We are in a story about balance. Our prayer life and our studies should guide our acts, right? Everything we do in Jesus' name in the world should be guided by the love of God and the mission of Jesus, which is to spread that love and make the world better for all of our neighbors. Once it becomes a chore, then we need to stop and reevaluate our motives, re-examine what we're doing. Look at the things we do at church, but also in our non-church lives. Why do we do them? How does this action serve God and our neighbor? How are we treating our neighbor as we want to be treated? If we're constantly examining these questions, and then we remember the true mission, we can truly serve Jesus as a Mary and Martha combined, which is what I think he's trying to tell us today. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.